Steelers travel to the Ravens, play the red hot Ravens, man. You have a team that's really declined, especially in the last 4 weeks, playing against a team that's really amped it up over the last 4 weeks. I mean, the Steelers and the Ravens, this will be their third matchup against each other. Of course, it's a divisional rivalry. The Steelers, like I mentioned, they've lost the past 4 games in a row, and the Ravens have really only kicked it up, man. They look like they're truly a legit Super Bowl contender. Even though they're playing in a wild card game, they look like a team that could easily have the number 1 overall bye. So, again, third matchup. The first matchup, the Steelers actually got the win. The second matchup, the Ravens boat raced this Steelers team. So, again, the spread is 9.5 points by the Ravens. It's kind of lopsided, to be fair. And so with what we've seen out of the Steelers and how they've declined, especially offensively speaking, and then what we've seen out of the Ravens and how their offense has only gotten better, which is crazy to think because they were already a top 3 offense in the league, but their defense has picked it up as well. You know, they're a top team in defending the run. They've really struggled in the passing game. They still have a few of those struggles, but they've certainly gotten better and more efficient on the defensive side of the ball. So hence why the number is so big here. BJ, before I get into the numbers and the model picks, this game, Mike Tomlin, he hasn't won a playoff game in 8 years. 8 years. So we're peddling mediocrity here. So I know the Steelers are your team. So before we get into anything, I wanted to ask you, if Mike Tomlin loses this game, do we start having to ask questions about his job? Are we concerned about his ability to coach a football team, or no concerns at all? Are you still riding with Mike Tomlin?
Yeah. It's interesting because the record for him is making the playoffs every year, right? But if you make the playoffs every year, it doesn't matter if you lose in the first round. I don't think that Mike Tomlin per se is the problem. I mean, if you kind of look back the last couple of years, I mean, after prime Ben Roethlisberger, there really hasn't been a great quarterback there, and they've got the defense is always there. But I say you keep. Personally.
I mean, yes. The questions are going to start flowing, especially if they lose this game. Now, to your point, I do think this is an overachieving team, all things considered.
Oh, yeah.
While they've struggled the past 4 games, let's look at the games that they've lost. The past 4 weeks, they lost to a red-hot Cincinnati team. They lost to a Kansas City team who has the number 1, or who has the 1 seed and the bye this week. They lost to Baltimore 3 weeks ago, playing at Baltimore. And then they lost to Philly in Philly. So, I mean, it's like, come on. Let's cut a little bit of slack. I don't want to cut too much slack because the decline of Russ has really been prevalent whenever you're watching these games. So that brings me to my next question, BJ. This Ravens defense is pretty solid. They, their pass rush is their key component of their defense. They're 5th in sacks per game. They showed a lot of vulnerability against the run. They're 17th in EPA per rush, 18th in rushing success rate. That's a statistic that's declined since week 11, potentially giving Henry the advantage. But their defense, it's not a strong suit like it used to be, but it's certainly not their weak point. Their weak point is we're going to turn it to the offense. George Pickens is dropping balls now. Russell Wilson's boom ball is no longer effective. If you're Mike Tomlin, do you install some packages and get Justin Fields out there on the field? I mean, you almost feel like you have to.
I would love that. I really would, because I'll tell you something right now. If they come out with the same game plan they've had all year, they will not win this game. 100%. Steelers cannot win this game. With Pickens being a head case, them not being able to run the ball, which is what Arthur Smith's going to want to do. And who else is out there to catch balls for you? Calvin Austin? It's like my height.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a burner. But, yeah, there's no way that they'll be able to keep up with the Ravens team if they have the same game plan. So, yes, absolutely. Justin Fields needs to be involved. They need to really surprise the Ravens here on what they're gonna do on the offensive side in order to win this game.
And that's really why I bring that up, because, just Mike Tomlin had the balls to sit Justin Fields while he went 4-2 to install Russ. And at the time, those first couple games, it looked like a genius move. I mean, Russell Wilson was hitting George Pickens on the most absurd plays we've seen in a while out of Russell Wilson. But, again, I don't want to argue against Russell Wilson too much because the last 4 games have been kind of a gauntlet, defensively speaking, outside of the Bengals. But he hasn't looked great. And, if you want to win the big game, you got to beat the best of the best. And Russell Wilson clearly doesn't have the ability to do that. So there's going to be some creativity as a 10-point underdog on the road in the playoffs. Kind of embarrassing, truthfully speaking. And if we're going ahead and look at the numbers, I mean, our model here over at Statlytics has 25-13 in favor of the Ravens. So even larger discrepancy in that number compared to the Vegas numbers. So just throwing that out there. Again, those are statistical based projections only. Those don't take into account injuries, weather, blah, blah, blah. But still, it's noteworthy. You know, there's a what is that? It's like a 13 point discrepancy in the model and then a 10-point spread in Miami. That's something to note. That's, playoff games don't really typically have that big of spread. And so you got to get creative if you're the Steelers here. Arthur Smith really needs to dice it up a little bit. He needs to get the green light from Tomlin to do something with Fields, in my opinion. And this Ravens defense, man, again, their weak spot is the passing game. So I know that doesn't really, that's not Justin Fields' strong suit. But what else are you going to do? Russell Wilson's moon ball isn't working. George Pickens isn't really catching balls like he used to. So, I mean, if I'm Tomlin, I'm trying to get the moon ball going with Russ at some point in the game, take advantage of that bad secondary. But again, the best approach here is do something different, do something that maybe the Ravens aren't necessarily expecting. And if you can generate some running game with Justin Fields at the helm, he's not a bad passer by any means. He's not great, but you can surprise him here and there as well and potentially control the clock a little bit. Keep the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hands. I mean, it's the only viable option in my opinion. So we'll see how it works and what kind of game plan they go into. But to me at this point, it's just like, what else are you going to do? You're 10-point dogs on the road to a team who arguably has the best offense in the league and a front seven on the defensive side that is phenomenal at stopping the run. So, BJ, any more thoughts on this game? And do you think your Steelers have a hope and a prayer?
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers beat the Ravens earlier in the season, 18-16. And the only way, this hurts me to say, but really the only way the Steelers are going to win this game is if they were able to hold the Ravens to under 20 points like that. And they're not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So Lamar is playing great. King Henry's the king. And they're going to put up points, 100%. Yeah. So and normally seeing a spread this big in the playoffs, I'm just smashing like the underdog spread, but not this time, unfortunately.
Man. Dude, this Ravens offense too, it's just, I can't emphasize how good it is. Mm-hmm. Number 1 in EPA per play, number 3 in overall success rate. Lamar Jackson has 4,100 yards in the air and 41 touchdowns. And then Derrick Henry, I mean, he's having a phenomenal year as well, career year. And so it's truly amazing what this offense is doing and what they're capable of doing, especially when everybody's healthy. I fully expect Zay Flowers to be green-lighted. He only had like a contusion on the knee. He just got banged up a little bit. So if the Ravens are going to be healthy, and the Steelers can't do anything crazy, it's got to be the Ravens. I think this team has every potential chance to win the bowl. My bear case for the Ravens and my bull case for the Steelers would be Mike Tomlin goes in there creative, and he gets both quarterbacks active and going, and then they somehow get creative and keep away from Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. But again, I just don't see it. So
me neither.